Hey folks, welcome. It's the Counter Clipping Show, and I see we already have quite a few people watching, so thanks everybody for stopping by. Hopefully the music wasn't too bad this time. Hopefully we also don't have any technical difficulties this time. That would be great. So we are clipping Killing Ground and actually Overlord as well. It's all kind of mixed together, and you're probably going to see me picking through counters with a confused look on my face because it's kind of strip punched, so I'll be organizing it as I go, but the most important thing is to get them all clipped. It's about a third clipped already. So, too bad I didn't bust this out for the actual anniversary of D-Day. That would have required planning on my part. Remarkable. And we are drinking Kalila. 12? This is a 12-year-old? Yes, this is the 12-year-old standard expression of Kalila, which is one of my favorites. So, again, welcome everybody. We have 34 people in here already. So, cool. So, tonight's topic is favorite designers. So, hopefully we'll talk about, a list of favorite designers, which I'm sure we will do. But also, I hope to get into at least a little bit of why we have favorite designers. What does that even mean? Does that mean that we have to play their games, without exception? We'll get into that. So, I suppose this is the anniversary of Barbarossa. I actually hadn't thought of that, and I definitely don't have that clipped. So the Barbarossa series, the GMT East Front series, I actually think I do have them all clipped at this point, except for Kiev to Rostov, which was sent to me by a viewer, so thanks for that. So we'd like to welcome Alan Salazar, Krusty Captain, Dale Brady, Grumpy Gamer, Jeff Anderson, Kaiser, Bill, Carl Creeder, Ken Kolobi, Lee Grant, Matt Taylor, Missing Seattle, who just disappeared from this list. I don't even know what this is supposed to be telling me. Richard D. Fortuna, Robert Moffat, and Stigler. So, and Kilroy was here just a minute ago, but now he left. Okay, so, and we also have news about Multi-Man's schedule. So, let's get into that first, right after I do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, this week's channel of the week is Matt White's channel. It is linked in the video description, so please do check that out. He's got 500 or so subscribers and definitely deserves more because he is doing very nice content. So please check that out and go subscribe to him and give him the thumbs ups and all the comments and all that stuff. The best thing you can do to support a YouTube channel is to thumbs up on the videos, subscribe to the channel, click the little bell icon to get notified, and comment on the videos. That is the number one means of support. And for folks live streaming, show up to the live streams and participate in the chat. So I certainly appreciate that. I'll mention there's a Patreon and a merch store linked in the video description where you can find Ardwulf's Lair attire. Model David Thompson was not available for photos this evening. And I have set up a Ko-Fi because I had a number of people ask me if they could just give me a donation without having to deal with Patreon. Ko-Fi lets you do that without setting up any kind of recurring. You can do that too, but it lets you give a one-off thing, and it's set for a $5 default. So feel free to do that. That is linked in the video description as well. Now that is out of the way, Multi-Man Publishing released some schedule information. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just going to talk about Third Winter, which is shipping now. My offhand guess is that it will continue to be shipping well into next week or the week after. But I am starting to see it pop up in people's hands. Now, I have a copy coming. You know who you are, so thank you very much. So, we'll see it. If that shows up on, I think Thursday is the target date for that. So, best Barbarossa. So, were we talking about Barbarossa specifically? Because I mean, when we say Barbarossa, we could mean a whole lot from anywhere from No Retreat, Russian Front, or Fire in the East, or the Barbarossa series from GMT. I mean, it really depends on what you want, and I think, if you're just talking about that first 3 months of Barbarossa, then I think you probably have to look at the GMT East Front series, which is maybe not as much fun for the Soviet player. Let's put it that way. But there's tons of games that cover the whole conflict on the East Front, including Russia Besieged and Russian Front and Russian Campaign. And I mean, Russia Besieged is a member of the Russian Campaign extended family. There's Thunder in the East as well, which we had a whirl at right before, more or less right before the pandemic shut everybody down. Hopefully we'll be picking that back up relatively soon. Anyway, the news I'm going to complain about is the GTS news. Thank goodness there's scotch. So, announced kind of by back channels a couple of years ago was the idea that MMP was going to re-release the first 2 GTS games. Those would be The Devil's Cauldron and Where Eagles Dare, together of which they handle all of Operation Market Garden. Playing that thing together is a magnificent experience that I highly recommend. However, after the 3rd game in the series, No Question of Surrender, the rules were revised somewhat, and the revision is significant in that, looking for the 4th Infantry Division, they're here somewhere, in that the pieces are no longer compatible. They changed some of the factors, the way the assault factors work changed. So you can't just play the old games with the current rules. The agreement among GTS fans seems to be that the new rules, we're going to call them the 2.0 rules, are better. So the idea was that MMP was going to combine the 2 in a reprint package. Now, both of the original games are now out of print. The Devil's Cauldron has been out of print for years. Where Eagles Dare has been out of print for a couple of years. Not sure where the 101st Airborne went either, but I don't have all the American pieces here. So, anyway, and then they were going to, all one package called A Magnificent Disaster, and it was going to update the game to the GTS 2 rules, okay, which would have been fantastic. Given that both individual games are quite large, and the reprint of Devil's Cauldron, which has been on MMP's pre-order list for a long time, is something like $180 pre-order price. That's, with the big discount. God only knows what the price on this thing would have been. I mean, I have to assume it would have been $400 or north, okay? Now, that's a problem, probably, for most potential buyers. So the news out of a couple weeks ago, and I just didn't have, Jim on last week, and so I didn't really want to, I think I did mention it, but was that the whole thing is canceled. Now, I take that statement at face value and assume that it means it is canceled and not it has been shelved for now and we'll get back to it in 5 years. And maybe that's more accurate. But they didn't say that. They said it was canceled. So what that means is that we will, instead of seeing A Magnificent Disaster combining both games, we will instead see a reprint, probably toward the end of the year or maybe early next year, of The Devil's Cauldron, which is only half the package, and both halves of the package are now officially out of print. However, as of when I checked, which was about 2 days ago, MMP does have Ziploc copies of Where Eagles Dare available for something like $123. They're both very large games. However, the Devil's Cauldron is a much more complete package in that it has a lot more scenarios. It has maps for the scenarios, so you can just bust out one of the one map scenarios or small map scenarios. Where Eagles Dare has a much less robust scenario selection, and that is a factor when viewing Where Eagles Dare on its own. I do highly recommend both games, right? But it's a little. It would have been easier to just say go get this, even though it's $500, rather than go get these 2 out of print games. I have considered picking up an extra copy. I am lucky in that I already have both of the previous games. I got Where Eagles Dare from Cool Stuff originally at Origins one year for a discount, and then traded it away, I think, in a pay it forward based on the assumption that I wasn't going to get to play it, and that it doesn't really have any suitable, small scenarios that I thought looked interesting. There is one that is supposed to be pretty good, and there's another one that's actually on BGG. So later on, I ended up buying another copy of Wargame Lair from a friend, and then I bought a copy of The Devil's Cauldron, punched but complete and in beautiful condition, off of the Facebook Concept Marketplace group. It was not cheap, but it was not as egregious a price as you might have feared. So I want to say I paid about $180 for it or something like that. So it has occurred to me to buy extra copies, but I don't want to be that guy, right? That's got, here's my 17 copies of War in Europe, haha, and my 5 shrink-wrapped copies of Campaign for North Africa, autographed by Richard Berg. So I don't want to do that. There's no value in that unless I lose pieces. I mean, you kind of think to yourself, well, what if I lose pieces? And that is maybe a concern. But chances are just as good with you playing with somebody else's copy. I mean, I'm not going to, if I'm doing it Solitaire, I'm going to do it on Vassal anyway. So it is a magnificent experience that I would encourage anybody to take up if they get the opportunity. In the meantime, there are GTS games in print, including Operation Mercury, which is also a very nice package, including The Greatest Day, which is also a really complete and robust package. So I would encourage folks to check those out. Both Operation Mercury and The Greatest Day are expensive, but they will go on sale when I almost said Microsoft. When how about that for an insult? Whenever MMP does their annual sale. So keep an eye out for that. And frankly, I see a fair number of copies of Operation Mercury and The Greatest Day popping up on the marketplace groups as well. So there's no particular reason to go get robbed on eBay to get it. So anyway, so there's that. So I'm, on the one hand, the reason that they gave was we don't have the resources to do this, and they said, and they're right, that it's not just because the rules change. It's not just a reprint. So they have to redo all the counters, and they have to then go in and do playtesting, which, some companies would probably say they did and not do. MMP doesn't really operate that way, at least for the vast majority of their games that they are working on as a company. The way I just said that makes it sound weird, and it probably is. And I don't know enough to understand how the international series games, which seem to not have a lot of these same ideas behind them, like in terms of really robust playtesting and stuff like that, some of the international series games don't look like they're robustly playtested. Let me put it that way. But everything else from MMP really does. I mean, all the gamer stuff, the ASL stuff, the GTS stuff, the great campaigns of the American Civil War stuff, I have no complaints about any of that. Then again, I only own 1 or 2 international series games, but they're games that are reputed to have issues. So there's that. All right. So again, if you get the opportunity, there's a fair amount of GTS video on YouTube, so check that out. I know that one of the channels of the week from a few weeks ago did a lot of GTS video, plus Ty Snoffer has a channel, and he's done a bunch of content, and I hope to at some point. But there doesn't seem to be a ton of point in supporting GTS 1 anymore, even though, other than, the really attractive topics that GTS has covered for me are D-Day, go figure, and Market Garden. So, there's that. None of this means that GTS is getting ditched or anything like that. GTS Bastogne should still be out this year, we hope. Schedule dependent, but if they said it's coming out, then I believe them that it's coming out. And I know that GTS Utah is still in play testing. And probably, I don't know this, but I'm hoping it ends up on the pre-order list sometime in the next year. Let me put it that way. So we'll see how that works. Okay, So I'm not the only person bummed out by that. So the other thing is that if resources is the reason, and I understand that, right? They don't necessarily have a huge development team on anything, let alone on GTS. They got to allocate those resources. Part of running a business is allocating the resources you have to do the stuff that you need to get done. And if allocating those resources to redoing the first two games means that we don't get Utah for 4 years, then I'm forced to agree that I'd rather see Utah. It is selfish of me to say that because I already have the Market Garden games, right? Those folks who are not as lucky as I to have those two games might feel differently about that, and I find that totally understandable. So, why are the unit symbols on some of these white? Maybe because they're the landing units. The scale on this thing's a little bit weird. It's actually... It is kind of SPI Cobra on a very similar scale, and the unit scale is kind of similar too, where it's for some divisions are broken into all the way down into battalions, and other divisions are only broken into regiments. And I haven't quite figured out what the difference is yet on this. Okay, so I have not had a chance to play Indian Ocean region yet. I just got it clipped last week, so I mean, if they don't have enough resources, like I said, I think we've gone into that. If I know that they only have a few people working on GTS, let me put it that way. I'm not talking about play testers. I'm talking about like Joe Chacon is the series honcho. I don't know that Joe has anybody helping him, and that may be the problem. I wish that series was more popular than it is. I think it deserves to be, but it has also staked out the ground of every game in it, except for No Question of Surrender, is really friggin' huge, which makes it difficult they're difficult to sell for that reason. Now, I don't know about No Question of Surrender because it's the one that I don't have, but the Devil's Cauldron, Operation Mercury, and The Greatest Day. This is the Gold Juno Sword one. The Utah Beach will also be called The Greatest Day Utah Beach. Those all have tons of scenarios, of small, medium, and large scenarios, all the way up to the big campaign. And I think that while GTS doesn't scale perfectly to like large or small scenarios, I think you can get an enjoyable mid-sized scenario out of it that's played out on one map. I think that's perfectly okay. So what I would like to see, I think, are a couple of smaller games in the series to get people into the series. And No Question of Surrender was just a topic that nobody really wanted. It's Italians in North... I think it's Italians or Free French or something like that in North Africa. And there's just not a lot of interest in that. On the other hand, you want to do Market Garden, the scale of the series is what it is, and you have these two huge games to cover that. So... all right. So, Lee Grant, The Dark Valley is quite good. I have played it. If we are going to have a lengthy discussion about East Front games, then I'm gonna have that be a topic of the week, and we can talk about that, and that would be fine. But that is not this week. This week we are talking about favorite designers, and I am sure we all have favorite designers, and who is on my list. I tend to not have a favorite designer. I tend to have these favorite designers, right? And the roster of that list, just like the list of my favorite games, really kind of changes on a sort of regular basis, right? If you ask me now who my favorite designers are, I will give you an answer that might be different than what I would have told you 2 years ago. For example, right now there is a tremendous feeling in the hobby, and with good reason, that Mark Herman is one of the greatest wargame designers still working in the hobby today. Ted Racer's name has been mentioned by Robert Moffat. I think Ted is a really good designer as well, and I think, for clarity, I think Mark is a really good designer. And then I think there's the term genius that we throw around a lot in a lot of different contexts, And I tend to be a lot choosier about the term genius than I think most people do. I want to say, and I'm going to say this with the caveat that I'm missing people, that I think there's probably no more than half a dozen true geniuses in the history of wargame design. I don't think Charles Roberts falls into that category. He's possibly the most important designer in the history of wargaming because he created commercial wargaming. I would call Jim Dunnigan a genius. Mark Herman, yeah, I think so. Richard Berg, I think, was a genius. Somebody had a really good line about Richard Berg the other day. They said he is the greatest designer that he ever worked with, that he wanted to throw out an airlock. And I think probably a lot of folks that worked with Berg or had contact with Berg probably felt that way too. Nevertheless, and Berg certainly had his idiosyncrasies as a designer, and sometimes kind of disappeared into the rabbit hole of over complexity and over design. But there's also plenty of counterexamples to that where he turned out something really sophisticated and elegant. The one that I saw pictures of today was the Men of Iron series, for example, which I do think is a brilliant design. More modern designers that we might add to that list might be somebody like Volko. And every designer, I'm gonna feel bad for leaving people out here. Every designer that has been mentioned in the chat is a designer that I think is worth looking at. Mentioned in the chat or mentioned by me. Mentioned in the chat includes Mark Herman at least several times. Joe Chacon, I guess we should count him, but Joe's got some respected designs as well. Herman Lutman, Jim Dunnigan, who I just mentioned. I want to say so here's another variable though, and it's why, if I'm going to list my 5 favorite designers, why Mark Herman's not on that list. And again, this is just me. Dean Essick, absolutely genius. I say that with no hesitation, and probably John Hill too. So if we're talking especially about living designers, right? So we can exclude people like John Hill, who has passed away, and like Richard Berg. I think Mark probably is in the top 5, but I would. Mark is not the same designer now. He's not designing the same kinds of things now as he was designing in the 70s and 80s. And it would be unrealistic, unreasonable to expect him to be. Mark is designing games that are much more, I'm going to use the word abstract. There's probably people who are going to differ with that now than he did. I mean, Pacific War is a perfect example, right? It is a mid to late 80s design. And where Mark as a designer is now does not line up very well with where I am as a player right now. It is entirely possible that in 10 years I will feel differently about it, but it is from where I sit today, that is the case. John Butterfield is a brilliant designer as well. I mean, I've got not piles, but I've got a decent number of John Butterfield designs, and a number of those things that I had as a teen that I still remember very fondly now that I look turn out to be John Butterfield designs. Kevin Zucker is a great designer. So if I was going to say, what does it mean to be to say this person is my favorite designer? Does it mean that I will absolutely buy, no questions asked, absolutely anything that they do? Because that's not true for me of Mark Herman, right? And again, just to get this out, I have nothing but the greatest respect for Mark and what he's doing now and what he's done in the past. I would say my number one designer, the designer for whom I will say, oh, he has a new game coming out? No problem, I will pre-order it. I don't need to know the details, thank you very much, is Mark Simonich. I have yet to be disappointed by a Mark Simonich game. I have yet to be of mistaken expectations for a Mark Simonich game. Mark has delivered what I have seen on the box, as it were, every single time. I will happily buy whatever he wants to publish, and unfortunately, there's an exception to that. I didn't buy Caesar Rome versus Gaul. Because it's just a redo of Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage, and that's probably not fair, but I didn't buy it. I'll probably get it eventually. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Adam Starkweather. Well, we already talked about how much I like GTS, and since I said that, I might as well tell you I really like the CSS system too from Compass. Nevertheless, Adam's not somebody I would. I mean, it depends. It depends. A lot of the more recent stuff that he's done is that OSS system, which I find myself not particularly interested in. Let me put it that way. When he gets back to World War II with CSS, I will absolutely pick that stuff up. Dean Essig, yes, genius, yes, great designer. What was Dean's last released game was probably Brazen Chariots, which I did play. Cole Worley, Cole is one of those edge cases. He does like, we have French units in here that I want to see. French and Poles, they're almost the same color. I'm not at all clear how to organize these. Cole Worley does really interesting historical games. War games, I don't know if you want to call them war games or not. I'm not sure I do, but I'm not sure I want to get an argument about it either. So there's that. John Gorkowski. John Gorkowski is designer of Indian Ocean region, for one thing. Also the designer of Balance of Powers, which is a World War I game that I like quite a bit. Kevin Zucker. I own a pile of Kevin Zucker games. Very happy with him as a designer. Mark Miller, sure. Frank Chadwick, sure. I'm not sure. Frank has like a recent credit in Thunder in the East in board wargaming. Mark does not, as far as I'm aware. Healthful mentions Mike Nagel. Mike has done some really good games. Enrico Acerbi, who I'm not familiar with his work. Brian Miller, I am not sure I am familiar with his work either, and it may be just because he has a super common name that it's not clear in my head. Joe Miranda certainly has done some good stuff. Bruce Maxwell. Bruce doesn't have tons of credits. But Bruce is very high profile right now because he has two things coming out from Compass, and Bruce himself is super excited about those, and so am I, and so are a bunch of other people, because Bruce's excitement. For one thing, Bruce's excitement is infectious, and the games do look really good. So, Missing Seattle says Mark Herman is like an artist; he must move on. Where's the... we're doing this again with the chat. Must move or can't do the same stuff he was doing 15 years ago. That's absolutely true, and it's ridiculous to expect him to be doing the same kind of stuff he did 15 years ago. It's just that my tastes are more aligned with a thing like Empire of the Sun than a thing like the Gettysburg game, which is the basis for Rebel Fury that's coming out. Although I still want to look at Rebel Fury, to be honest. Doug Sunseth mentions Phil Barker, the British one. The American one is more known as an RPG and or miniatures guy. Richard Bodley Scott, I have never heard of him. But if he is a miniatures guy, then that's why, because I'm not an expert on that. Dan Verson. Dan Verson has done a bunch of stuff, not only with Dan Verson Games, but from GMT and maybe some other folks as well. Jerry White, who I think is really coming into his own as a high-profile designer with the release of Atlantic Chase. I mean, I don't know that I mean, again, Mark Herman is on my list of favorite designers, and I don't like everything Mark Herman did. I don't like everything Richard Berg did either, and Richard Berg is also on that list of favorite designers. Mark Simonich, I think I like everything I've played from Mark Simonich. Joe Balkowski is an enormously influential designer for a bunch of reasons. One, he's done some really influential games, including one of my favorites, The Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series. But remember that Joe Balkowski also did SPI's Atlantic Wall and has done other games about D-Day and was the official historian of the 29th Infantry Division? I think so. And has written like a series of books on that are pretty much the official history of that infantry division. So, I mean, that's kind of very important. War in Europe is an oddball. It's based on, if you look at the design credits, it's credited to Dunnigan and Terry Hardy. And I think the basis of that is that Dunnigan designed War in the East, and that Terry Hardy took it all and stitched it together at the end. But that's a guess on my part, not based on actual information. Jeffrey Westovich says John Korgowski's Ypres is a classic. I would agree. Ed Beach, yep, I would certainly. He's done some extremely noteworthy stuff. Stephen Reynolds mentions for thinking out of the box Chad Jensen, Volker, who I take to be Volko, Mark Herman, Herman Lettman mentioned again. Let's see. I mean, so that's what I'm sticking with. That's what I mean when I say I want to very carefully apply the term genius. Really earth-shaking changes in the hobby. And I think that you can limit that to folks like Dunnigan and Mark Herman and John Hill, and another maybe half a dozen names. And I think that's probably it. Keith Tracton for World at War 85. I have never played a Keith Tracton game, including World at War 85, so I cannot comment on that. Purple Norseman's mentions Borg. I assume he means Richard Borg, which is always, of course, a cause of confusion with Richard Berg. But Richard Borg is the designer of the Commands and Colors series, which I think is a good series. It's an enjoyable game. Whatever version of it or flavor of it you'd like to play is pretty much fine. I will say that I don't know that I want to necessarily offer Richard Borg props for designing so many good games, because I'm not convinced he's designed more than one game. It's possible he has other credits that I'm unaware of. But so much of his output is the Commands and Colors stuff, in whatever historical or fantasy or sci-fi or whatever configuration. That's going to sound like I'm shortchanging him, and that's not my intention. But a lot of what's he's kind of like the Boston of wargame designers, in that he had a really great song, and all the other songs are basically variations of that song. There's nothing wrong with that. You find a formula and run with it. I mean, Charlie Roberts did that. That's why we had generations of Avalon Hill games with basically one set of mechanics and one CRT. But it's why I'm not going to put him on a list like this. So, who designed U-Boat? I don't know. Don't ask me. And like I said, I enjoy Commands and Colors. I think it's a fine light war game. I haven't enjoyed all flavors of Commands and Colors equally. I think I've mentioned that I've had a pretty miserable experience playing Memoir 44, for example, but I'm not convinced that's Memoir 44 as much as it is shitty scenarios that I happen to have played when they're playing the big D-Day games, which is all I've played. So Heth will know that they can be favorites whether they're geniuses or not. a designer, a favorite designer who's not a genius. Vance von Voorhis. I don't think Vance I don't think Vance has any innovation that's quite that big attached to him, and yet I have enjoyed a lot of Vance's designs, and regard him very highly as a designer. There's also, that's another good point that Kyle Reese mentions, is you do get a little extra props, I think, for dealing with topics that are not the same old topics, right? If we want to talk about, best bulge games, okay, cool, but there's a million bulge games. There's so much competition in that space. We want to talk about squad level World War II tactical games, fine, but there's tons of competition in that space. You get a little more props, from me at least, if you've treated a lot of oddball conflicts, which is something that Richard Berg was famous for. Certainly he did popular games about popular subjects, but he did a lot of games about weird stuff, too. There's a whole box of battles of the Italian Wars in Arquebus, for example, in the very well-regarded Men of Iron series. Where is... Oh, right here. That's under... the tray's right underneath where I was. That's a weird conflict. There's not no games dealing with the Italian Wars, but there's not very many. So Killing Ground is basically Operation Cobra, and Overlord is basically second edition Cobra that adds the beach landings, and Overlord replaces and or adds to some of the counters, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. Kyle Reese mentions Ty Bomba and Joe Miranda. I am not sure I've ever played a Ty Bomba game that I was that into, but Ty also has a lot of credits, so don't quote me on that. Justigard says nobody has said Brian Train. I'll say Brian Train. I think Brian is a really good designer, and who is also working in a space that isn't that well covered. Now, it's the counterinsurgency space is becoming increasingly well covered in recent years for reasons I take it I don't have to explain. But boy, YouTube's acting up here. But Justigard says the Distant Plain is the best coin game. I'm not sure that's true. It's definitely not the one I like to play the most. But it is a really interesting game, and well worth your time to check out. And I can absolutely see why some people will feel like it's the best coin game. Ted Racer game. So what kind of history do I have with Ted's games? I've interacted with Ted quite a bit over the last couple of years, for one thing, on social media. So bear that in mind. So Ted's the designer of Paths of Glory, which we all know about that. Maybe we'll even see video number 4 at some point. And also the designer of something else I've played, Great War in Europe, which was a Command Magazine game and was later brought in by GMT. And I don't know what's going on with the YouTube metrics. It is misbehaving ferociously. I'm trying to think of Ted's other credits. Ted did Clash of Giants, which I haven't played. Mike Anthony, I'm talking about war games. If we start talking about RPGs, then we'll be here all night. We'll get to this comment in a second. Richard Berg did a War on the Taiping Rebellion, right? It's Manchu. It's an S&T game. Somebody mentioned this on a stream not too long ago, and I actually have it sitting upstairs, so I'll be keeping that. Purple Norseman says, no, I don't think so, because Kevin's actually done some stuff. Kevin's done some stuff that's not even Napoleonics, actually, but he's best known for Napoleonics. So it's possible that I am merely more aware of Kevin's other efforts than I am with Richard Board. That's plausible. Kaiser Bill says Don Greenwood often argued that designers were not credited on Avalon Hill games because the developers were more responsible for the end product. That might be true. I can tell you that it wasn't always true, Cringespiel. But that might be true. And you know, I'm not gonna argue with Don Greenwood on that point. Nathan Lander mentions Al Nafi. Al does not have that. I mean, he was with SPI back in the day. I don't know that Al has that many designs. However, I will give Al enormous credit for Imperium Romanum because it is an absolutely unique game. There really isn't anything else like Imperium Romanum. And for that reason, a lot of people don't like Imperium Romanum. And they're not wrong to say, you know, a lot of these wildly imbalanced scenarios are not fun to play. That's probably true. But as a historical study, I think Imperium Romanum is pretty unique. And it's an enormous piece of scholarship as well. That old chestnut says he witnessed the Ed Greenwood versus Don Greenwood fist fight in '94. I can only assume, I've never met or seen Don Greenwood, but I've been in the same room as Ed Greenwood, and I have to assume that would be the slowest fist fight in the history of fisticuffs. Greg Kostikian, yes, Greg is a tremendously noteworthy designer, not necessarily of war games. I mean, Greg Kostikian did do war games too, right? But I think he's better remembered and more influential as an RPG designer. S. Craig Taylor, the late great S. Craig Taylor, who Stigler mentions, designer of a number of classics, including Wooden Ships and Iron Men and Flat Top. Alan Salazar mentions the obscure 17th, 18th, and 19th century topics. I mean, that's something. Berg always had that going on, right? I mean, so if you had asked me, let's say it's 2005. That sounds about right. Okay. Where, you know, I still have a few war games, but I haven't played war games in about 10 years and haven't thought very hard about war games. If you asked me then who my favorite wargame designer was, I would have said with no hesitation whatsoever that it was Richard Berg. With no hesitation whatsoever. And I was under no illusions about, you know, Richard's less, you know, slightly shakier projects, right? Like, you know, everybody knows about Campaign for North Africa, for example, but there were other examples too that maybe Richard could have benefited from a little more rigorous development on. Let's call it that. But at the same time, you got other stuff where, you know, either he had the development or it just worked, and he was lucky. Maybe, I don't know. John Edwards, another very important designer. Randy Heller for Bitter Woods, and Randy's still very active as well, certainly with Bitter Woods. Make sure I'm not. So Roger McGowan, I could, to be honest, I could do a whole show about Roger McGowan. to be honest about it, Roger has done so many of those iconic wargame covers that we all know Roger based on that work alone. I don't want to miss the mention of Mitchell Land, who Henry Sikorsky mentions. He has done a bunch of stuff. He's the developer on the new version of Vietnam 65 to 75, but is probably best known for the GMT Next War series. That series design originated with Gene Billingsley, and in Crisis Korea 1985 or 1995 or whatever it was, and then Mitch picked it up and returned it into the Next War series, which I have not played as much of as I would like, but there's definitely some good stuff there. Mark Mazicki What Agri Day? What are the two games that Mark Mazicki did? Because I recognize the name, but I couldn't put him on a specific title. A.E. Goodwin. When I hear the name Arthur Goodwin, I could swear there was somebody that worked for Marvel Comics named I think that was Archie Goodwin, actually. Kastikian did Swords and Sorcery? I didn't know that. Creatures That Ate Sheboygan, I think I did know that. Scrimmage. If I had to guess, I would say Scrimmage is probably a Dunnigan design. I could be. Don't quote me on that. If somebody wants to look that up on BGG, be my guest. But if I had to guess without checking, I would say Scrimmage is probably a Dunnigan design. Ken Cloby mentions Michael Resch. Mike Resch is the designer of the 1914 series. Very awkward name for the series, but this is what we're calling it. I am calling it the Mike Resch series of World War I games from GMT. Justigard says he's not convinced they're good games, but that Mike Resch is incredibly smart and the research of the games is insane. I would certainly agree with the first part. I feel like I would enjoy those games. They may not necessarily be to all tastes. I'm going to say, without explanation, because we could do a whole show on this, that I think they may be better simulations than games. And maybe we'll get back to that in a later show. David Schroeder. Paul Schroeder? David A. Schroeder doesn't sound right, but the Der Weltkrieg guy. I'm going to call him the Der Weltkrieg guy. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of other credits by him, but that's actually a really, really solid game system, I think. Okay, apparently... Oh, is A.E. Goodwin one of the Total War people? Well, we don't need to put him on the list then. Barbarian Kings is a neat little game, actually. Good call. Matt Taylor, who did Starfleet Battles? Did Steve Cole do Starfleet Battles? Is that right? Stephen Cole? I think so. And I'd call that a war. I mean, that's sure a war game. Mark McLaughlin, not only for War and Peace. So Mark McLaughlin did War and Peace, the Avalon Hill War and Peace, which you just saw me unbox a couple of weeks ago. Also did 1776, is basically the same system. He also did a 2-game set from 3W, if I'm not mistaken. One was the Army of the Potomac, and the other one was the Army of the Tennessee. Together, they could be combined to be a larger game called Mr. Lincoln's War. And that also uses that same basic system from War and Peace. The bad news is that the mounted maps for Mr. Lincoln's War, are the flat-out worst mounted maps I have ever seen. They are ugly, and they are hideously warped in every copy that I have ever seen the guts of. So, in terms of physical components, Mr. Lincoln's War doesn't hold up very well. But the game system is pretty good, and I mean, it was used for 1776, too. Panzer Group Guderian is probably a Dunnigan design, would be my guess. That's a super... Antonio Bravo, thanks for stopping back. Mike Benningoff, yeah, who is the fellow who runs Avalanche Press. Dr. Mike Benningoff, as far as I'm aware. And they've certainly done some interesting designs that I am not going to... The only design I feel competent to discuss is the one that I don't like, which is Panzer Grenadier. I'm perfectly fine with mounted maps. I enjoy mounted maps. I don't like shitty mounted maps. So, there's that. So, I mean, Steve Cole's still running SFB, just so we know. I have never had any interaction with any of those folks. Well, not with the publisher, but with... I will tell you, I had a big turn-off with some of the people that ran some of the demos at Origins one year. Not super... impressed with whoever that was that I talked to, but I can tell you it wasn't Steve Cole. David Thompson, thanks for stopping by. Bruce Harper, sure, but I got qualms about including Bruce Harper on this. Okay, so David Thompson says, it might not be a super popular opinion, but for him, Martin Wallace is very influential. I think influential is true. I will say that Martin Wallace lost an enormous amount of my respect in his response to the Halifax Hammer. That was for, I think, the Civil War game. Was it the Civil War game or the Rev War game? And it's basically an unstoppable tactic, and Martin Wallace's response was basically, well, don't play with those people. In response to the statement, the flat and correct statement that his game was busted. And I that doesn't sit right with me. David Thompson, yes, that youngster. I'm pretty sure he is younger than me, so I can call him that. It's all good. And besides, he could drive up and kick my ass if he really wants to. Mike Anthony mentions that SFB is wholly owned. Well, owned or licensed or however that works out. But yeah, Task Force Games has been kaput for eons. So, certainly, there are a number of very well-regarded Martin Wallace designs. I am not sure I have played any of them. I am pretty sure I played one Martin Wallace game, and I don't remember which one it was. So, Alan Emmerich. Alan's super charming. I guess Alan runs the auction at, or whatever it is, at Consim World Expo. And I bet that's fun to just sit in, actually. So, yes, very nice scotch. It's my favorite scotch that I can get in Ohio, is what I tell people. Or my favorite distillery, Canadian Rye. So the problem with we could talk about this for a minute. Yes, Gina is involved in Skies Above Britain, and I'm gonna struggle to remember her name. The designer of the new Panzerblitz East Front that is coming from MMP, which looks interesting. Lee Brimacombe Wood, designer of a bunch of air stuff. At least that's how I best know Lee Brimacombe Wood, as the designer of air stuff. Did he do? What's that Battle of Britain game that I bought last year and it looks awesome? It'll occur to me in a minute. I can picture the box in my head. I almost feel like solitaire designers ought to be in a separate category, because if we're going to start talking about designers of solitaire games, then there's a bunch of names that I'm going to pull up that aren't necessarily well known for doing non-solitaire games, like Gregory M. Smith or Ben Madison, for example. The Burning Blue is, in fact, the game I was thinking of. My chat never lets me down with this when I forget stuff. Antonio Bravo, Canadian Rye. So the trouble, as far as I can tell with Canadian Rye, is not that it's bad, it's that you don't know what is in it until you drink it, because unlike American Rye, which if it's called rye whiskey, it has to have at least 51% rye in the mash bill. And Canadian Rye does not have that requirement, so it it just has to have some rye. So it might not taste like rye at all. I love rye whiskey, and I am told that there is excellent Canadian whiskey available. I just don't know what it is called or who makes it or what to buy. So I will accept specific recommendations that are not like Seagram 7 or Canadian Club or whatever else. I have a bottle of Crown Royal that I bought for the dice bag not that long ago, and it was the rye, and it's okay, but it's not good and neat. It's just not good and neat. On the rocks, it's okay. All right, so we have now named at least 10 million wargame designers. So, Alan Salazar asks the Don Hearn design series on the Wars of Louis XIV. Are we talking about the No Peace Without Honor from Compass that's coming? It's based on the No Peace Without Spain series? Because if so, I want that game. That is an interesting and underserved topic, and the system is pretty good. Empires of the Ancient World does look interesting and it's kind of up my alley. So I'm willing to play it, but haven't had the opportunity. Fabrizio Vianello. So I wouldn't count Fabrizio only because Fabrizio's first credit is just a couple of years ago. I don't think he's given us enough time. So that's my only reservation there. Almost everybody else, at least, even if they didn't... I mean, Craig Taylor didn't have that many credits, for example. But he's got more than the two I mentioned. But, you know, well, he's not with us anymore, so there's that. But, you know, those were massively influential games that were favorites for a long time, and I think still hold up really good today. Peter Rushton says that he's been told that Canadian whiskey is good, and he has also been told the same about bagpipe music. I like some bagpipe music, believe it or not. So, Rob Markham. Interesting. What game are we talking about this? I'd be curious. All right. Four Roses is not bad, but it's not my favorite bourbon in its price range. Which is key, actually. Ed Beach was mentioned earlier. So, who's the World at War guy was mentioned up thread. Bruce Harper. Okay, so I don't think that it is reasonable in any sense to consider. So Bruce's credits, as far as I'm aware, somebody wants to mention something else that Bruce did, by all means. I'm going to talk about Advanced Third Reich, Rising Sun, and A World at War. I don't think that there is any reasonable way in which those games can be considered good design work, which is not the same as me saying that I think they are bad games. I don't actually think that, which is why I still have a copy of A World at War on my shelf right now, and the 2 expansions. But essentially what happened with those is we had the old Avalon Hill Third Reich, and tons and tons of additional over the course of a couple of different iterations, tons of additional detail was added onto it. And that's it, right? That's the evolution of that game system. And I don't think that's necessarily good design work, right? To just add more complexity and more complexity and more complexity and more corner case rules and more corner case rules, and holy shit, the book is 250 pages. So without saying that A World at War is bad or not worth playing or whatever, which I don't agree with, there's people that definitely like it, and I sympathize with that. I think it's a fairly a very inelegant piece of design work. Let me put it that way. So maybe we're going to be controversial here, and that's why we were up to like 120 people at one point. I don't know. I would also be fine with Jim Crone getting more games out, especially if there were more expansions for Space Empires 4X. Now, we might say that... See, that's the problem, though. I mean, is Advanced Third Reich the best strategic ETO game? First of all, I don't think it is. But even if we say that, Well, what about a World of War? You know, the more detailed version, isn't that better? Or if that's not better because we don't want the complexity, then what about regular Third Reich? Isn't that better because it's simpler? Maybe. I mean, you know, everybody's going to give you a different answer on that. Most overrated designer. That's tempting. That is tempting as a topic. I've already got a fair amount of bitching in here. That's tempting as a topic, but I also don't want to focus on stuff I don't like. Richard Berg, John Prados. I'm not sure anybody mentioned John Prados, actually. Did I mention John Prados? I would put John Prados in on the list of pretty elite designers. Ty Bomb and Joe Miranda were definitely mentioned. I am going to have to take a break. My smoke alarm is going off. I'll be right back. Okay, so it stopped, and the house isn't obviously on fire. So we'll get back to it here. We got about an hour left. In terms of, we could probably count. You know, we could probably have metrics for this of like innovations per year involved in the industry, and if we were counting it that way, I think it very likely that our list would be dominated by two names, Jim Dunnigan and Dean Essig. I think that's true. Carl Creeder, I like Goss, and for the same reason that I am not putting the World at War group on that list. I wouldn't, and I've talked to Joe, and Joe's a nice guy, but I wouldn't necessarily put him in that class either. Based on Goss, right? Based on, if we want to talk about best wargame map artists, then Joe is in my top 5. I will tell you that. So I will have that. I can't use that as the pause music because then YouTube will ding me for that. So we can't do that. Rich Banner and Frank Chadwick. This is an interesting call. You know, inventors, in a sense, of the monster game. On the other hand, I'm not sure Drangnock Austin was the first monster game. It might have been. Did it come out before or after La Bataille de la Moskva? I think it was before. But in either case, I'm pretty sure Frank was involved. Another, I guess, irrelevant statistic for anybody else is wargame designers who I have personally met. That list is very small. I have met Bruce Maxwell. I have met Frank Chadwick. I have met Herman Lettman. I'm trying to think if there's anybody. I've met Mark Walker, whose name got mentioned up thread as well. Trying to think if there's anybody else. Are we calling Gary Gygax a wargame designer? I mean, technically it's true, so I guess I'll say that. I mean, I met a bunch of those old TSR people over the years. You know, even if it was just running into them in elevators. Like, I think I ran into Jim Ward in an elevator one time. There we go. Doug mentions the La Bataille de la Moskva was 1975. That's definitely later, and I'm pretty sure the game is smaller too. So there's that. Hot topic tonight. Apparently, that's what happened. The trouble is I can barely hear it over the roar of the various air conditioners, and in fact, probably due to the scotch, I am kind of hot. Designers I've played a game with. Other than Gary Gygax. Jeff Horger. I've played games with Jeff Horger, but that's kind of cheating because he's local. I mean, I guess it's not, but... and Jeff's got... I've never played... I've met Dean, that's true. I've never played anything with Dean. I have played... I've met Curtis Bear, who's the designer of... Poop. The Operation Exporter game. The OCS Operation Exporter game, which is Reluctant Enemies. I know because it's... I could look because it's sitting on the shelf. And then... So, I mean... You know, not a lot of... I can't claim to have met a lot of designers. Let me put it that way. So I don't think that's throwing me off. I can verify, because I've seen pictures from those years, that Richard Berg was at Origins in many of the years that I was in Origins, but I'm not sure I would have recognized him at the time. And Pat Mullen, that's true. That game's not out yet, so there's that. But Pat is the designer of A Hot Dry Season, now available for pre-order on Legion Games website, and which we will eventually do some more video on. I don't feel particularly urgent on that because we did a lot of video on A Hot Dry Season, and I hope that people got the message that I really liked it. Operational Vietnam. I thought it worked really well. So, I think I've pretty much mentioned everybody at this point that would necessarily be on my list. What is going on? So the YouTube metrics designer I would want to play a game with. Actually, Alan Emmerich would probably be fun to play a game with. I've also met people that I'm not sure they have any design credits. Like I've met John Krantz, for example. I'm not sure John has any design credits. I could be wrong about that. I would think Alan Emmerich would be a fun guy to play. Would be a fun guy to play games with. It might be fun to play games with Jack Rady, for that matter. Brian is very, very personable fellow too. I've talked to Brian. I'm talking met in person, by the way. When I say met, there's a number of additional folks who I have talked to on the internet. Right. I've met Greg Smith too. Good call on that. So he was at Compass Expo, and I talked to him not long enough, to be honest. And I've met Joe Belkowski, thinking about it. And I've met Ed, what's his name? Chris Withers, and somebody else who's with the GCACW group with MMP. Fred's got something coming out. So I've never met Fred in person either, though. I've talked to Fred a fair amount on Twitter, but... So it'll be very interesting if Coruscant Pocket 2 ever actually comes out. Does anybody know anything about the East Front Battles series from 3W? Because I've been looking at Spires of the Kremlin. I think I did know that about Alan, I think. I am at this point just clipping. I've given up on any. I will organize the counters at a later time. I'll probably have to print out counter sheets and create a correlation. Which designers are... Jeff Beeler asks, which designers are most likely to show up at which convention? So, I guess the question I'd ask there is, how hardcore a Wargame convention do you want it to be? Because there's a ton of designers that show up at, say, Gen Con, right? There's a fair number of designers that show up at Origins, but they're not really designers you would... Amabel Russell's another one I've met. Not really wargaming heavy conventions anymore, right? On the other hand, when you start talking about WBC, which I think has a lot of designers showing up, or Consim World Expo, I think if unless you're going to start talking about specific publisher outputs like MMP designers or Compass designer or whatever, I think in general, if you want to meet designers, go to WBC or Consim World Expo. Consim World Expo has a more focused wargaming thing than WBC does these days, but there's a lot of wargames at WBC, so... Doug Sunseth mentions the Gamma Trade Show. Yeah, that's not a public-facing event. I've never been. I had the opportunity to go one time, and I probably should have taken it. I chose to go to the Alliance show instead that year, and it's only open to retailers and publishers and people in Gamma and stuff like that. Ted Racer's been discussed already, so that sounds super dismissive. Sorry, Ted. We've spoken glowingly about his work. Ted's got the Dark Summer, which just came out from GMT, and the Deadly Woods, which just came out from Revolution Games. I think Revolution Games. And they're basically the same system. It's the Dark Valley Chit Pull system. And I have to say, I balked at the Dark Summer, in part because I have a shitload of Normandy games. But there's been a bunch of traffic on it since then, and on YouTube, and I've watched some of that traffic, and it looks pretty good, actually. So I may end up grabbing it. I will also tell you that let me I guess talk a little personal stuff for a minute. I have mentioned, I have not made a secret about it, but I haven't really talked about it on the stream, that in February of 2020, right before the pandemic blew the world up, my then employer put everybody in a room and said, we're outsourcing. I mean, they of course didn't put it this way, but they said, we are outsourcing you all, go to hell. And we had, that's lame, but we had ample notice, and I had time to prepare, and so I was, and when there's unemployment too, so it sucked, but it could have been worse, and at no point, at some points it was absurdly stressful, but at no point was there an actual catastrophe occurring. And so I have worst job market since the Great Depression, and all, due to largely to the pandemic, and this wasn't pandemic related, but because there was pandemic related assistance available, I was less hurting than I might otherwise have been. So as of the beginning of this month, I have taken a new position, which is taking up a great deal of my time. It's not really an inordinate amount of my time, to be completely honest, but the late Lauren Wiseman at that. And we're going to be needing a new bottle of this very soon. Fortunately, it's not hard to find here. I believe this will benefit from just a tiny amount of water. Just a tiny amount. There's enough. Doesn't need a lot. It's bottled at 43%. So, that has not... I said that was not going to interfere with the channel, and I was wrong. It has interfered with the channel a bit. It is not going to do anything with the Monday stream, but I didn't get an unboxing out last week. I'm going to try and get an unboxing out this week, and I should be able to make that happen tomorrow. So... and I didn't get an RPG video because I didn't have one in the can. I have unboxing videos in the can. I just need to edit them. So there's that. I've also got a video in progress on 2 Minutes to Midnight, which is Stuart Tong new game on the Cold War. So hopefully we'll be seeing that pretty soon. Not 100% clear on where I was going with this. So in part, I guess because I didn't want to increase the amount of financial pressure, I was not really buying any games. I did buy a couple of things on eBay that I got for good prices, but for other than when I had the sale and I had a little bit of extra cash from my commission, I didn't really buy anything anywhere. And now that the employment situation has changed, I went and ordered 4 games. I ordered 2 from GMT through Cool Stuff, and I ordered 2 from Hollandspiel through Hollandspiel. So, Hollandspiel stuff is print on demand. It will show up, and neither of the Hollandspiel games are not war games. The GMT games are good old-fashioned hex encounter war games. One of which is the new version of Flying Colors, which I want for the 3-inch box and the extra battles and all that stuff, and the expansions included. And the other is a game that I've been looking at for a long time. Gallipoli 1915, Churchill's Greatest Gamble. This is the Jeffrey Phipps game. A companion game on Mons is coming. It's on P500 right now. It actually looks quite interesting. And we will open it up and take a look at it. And it will probably be here this week. And if it is here this week, then you'll probably see an unboxing of it at some point. And probably Flying Colors as well. Which will probably be make Flying Colors the first game I've done 2 unboxings for and uploaded them both. So, because I unboxed my original too. All right, I would assume Todd Walser that playing with Kevin Zucker would be illuminating if it was a Napoleonic item at least. So yeah, I mean, another thing is that I have we had the Armchair Dragoons digital convention this past weekend, which went off very well, but I had committed to it before I got the job. So it was kind of like a thing that then had to be squeezed in. There were actually 2 things. NavyCon was like that too, and except the NavyCon paid me, so that was a paid gig. But I feel super overstretched right now between gaming 3 days a week and running the channel and working. I feel overstretched, and that's why I didn't get as much done last week as I wanted to. Ken Kloby, so that's my reservation, is I don't like the fact that the map doesn't cover Cherbourg, and it's just like an off-map thing. I think that's weird, and I'm not sure I like that. Maybe it's not a problem, but I'm not sure I like it. Yes. So, actually, speaking of Roger McGowan, if you look at a lot of the World War I games by GMT with the sort of classic Roger McGowan type of covers, this and 1914 Offensive Outrance and 1914 Twilight in the East, those are all one series, but the Gallipoli game has a very similar box style. And is a different game system from a different designer. So, actually, I thought NavyCon was a lot of fun. It's kind of just talking about really hypothetical military technology type of thing. I thought it was actually a lot of fun. I thought the panels that I produced and listened to were interesting and engaging. John Longshore mentions the revised counter sheets. Yes, where are mine? Because I got that too. In fact, I think it's in here. Nope. Okay, where did I put it? That was the half sheet. Yeah, this is it. The half sheet of revised counters for the 1914 games. I think when we say that, we only mean Serbian, Moose, Sterbian, and Offensiva Outrance. We seem to bring this up every week. Maybe I should actually bust one of these out at this point. The only one that is punched is Serbian, Moose, Sterbian. Although, don't be shocked if you see one of those show up on the counter clipping stream for a month, because both Twilight in the East and Offensiva Outrance are pretty big. And I got to talk to somebody about the expansion pick pack for Offensiva Outrance, who reached out to me about it, and then I didn't get back to them. So that makes me feel like a dick. Yeah, so well, the thing is that it's a one-map Normandy game, which is fine, right? There's a fair number of one-map Normandy games. I already have Normandy 44, which is a one-map Normandy game that does have the entire Cotentin Peninsula and Cherbourg on the map. What it doesn't do, it doesn't go as far as Cobra. So if you want the game about Operation Cobra, then maybe you're looking for something different. Maybe you're looking at Killing Ground, for example, which we're clipping right now. Or maybe you're looking at the S&T Cobra, which is one of the better regarded old S&T games. Recently and less recently redone by our good friends at Decision Games. I thought about that. I don't need the Offensiva Outrance Deluxe map. It's a 3-map game already. It's going to be enormous. I don't want to store rolled maps, to be honest. I got tweezers. I'm comfortable with counters and stacks. Would be nice if GMT did that series on the Italian front. Do you mean the Mike Resch series, John? Because I'd be all over that, actually. But I will tell you that the Italian front of World War I is not generally considered a really exciting thing to game. There was movement on that front, but there was something like 9 battles or 13 battles or something like that over the Isonzo River back and forth, none of which had... I got my new counter sheet maybe 2 weeks ago. If you're in the U.S. and haven't gotten them yet, I'd probably inquire with GMT. Oh, cool. Just a Guard played Der Weltkrieg with Jeffrey Phipps. That's cool. I do like the Der Weltkrieg series. And there is a Der Weltkrieg volume on the Italian front, too. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. I'd be all over that, personally. But, again, I'm not sure people would consider them fun. Right, a lot of people balked at Serbian Moose Sterbian, and that's a really interesting campaign historically. Actually, I really want to play that game. Yeah, I know that Jeffrey has a YouTube channel. Jeffrey Phipps, the designer, has a YouTube channel, and he's done some videos on Mons, and I have not pre-ordered it yet, but you know, I might as well. It's not coming out this month, so I might as well wait and get my hands on Gallipoli and take a look at that first, because it's going to use the same rifle and spade system. Yes, well, I understand the desire for small footprints. I mean, that does make sense to me. However, at the same time, I have the luxury of living in a place where people have basements and no pets, or the kind of pets that don't go in the basement. And we can leave stuff set up for lengthy periods. By the way, we just started a new game of the Blitzkrieg Legend. We have switched sides. I am still on the German side. but the other German player is now playing the French, and the French player is now playing the other Germans, and I'm playing the Germans on the other front. So we are on turn 2, and turn 1 took 2 sessions to do. So Bowen Simmons. Rachel Simmons retired from gaming and game development. That was announced relatively recently. I don't know why. I don't have any background on that. I only know that she did a bunch of games that were very well regarded, and I'm going to guess and say that her presence will be missed. So there was movement on the Italian front, like I said, but it really would depend on the scale, right? And I'm not sure off the top of my head what the numerical scale on the 1914 games are, nor am I sure that it's the same scale, actually. I think it is, but... So, I do like Der Weltkrieg quite a bit. I bought the whole series. I am not... Let's see, I'd be curious to see those from Nuts Publishing, but I don't know that there's a really easy way to get Nuts Publishing product here in the States either. And Europa Simulazione, which is the best wargame company name ever, is also, I don't know where to get their stuff here in the U.S. There you go. Justigard mentions Burning Mountains, 1916 from Paper Wards, Straff Expedition and Gorizia from Europa Simulazione, and the Der Weltkrieg series, yep. And the Gorizia game, I have no idea. So, at some point, let me see if I can pull up an example. Some people have huge problems with these maps. Let me see if I can pull up a graphic here. I made the mistake several weeks ago now of doing a topic of graphics and not having any graphics to show off, which was probably dumb. All right, we can do this. Well, that's irritating. Alright, I don't know why it's only in a corner of the screen, but this is the map to the Italian front. And you might notice that it looks super weird. Like the hexes aren't really hexes. Well, the hexes are hexes, but the terrain is not based on the hex. It's based on the hex side. This takes some getting used to, and in terms of graphical presentation, the hex sides are not always as clear as they should be. You'll notice that up here in the mountain, I mean, this is in the mountains, so maybe it's not as big a deal, but in this rough terrain, it's very hard to tell where the hexes are, and you really got to pay attention to make sure you don't screw anything up. So let me fix this. So A, lot of people don't like that, and B, a lot of people, Ted Racer says that actually makes him physically nauseous. I think that's, I mean, okay, but that doesn't do that with me, but it does take some getting used to. It takes an hour or two of playing on it to get used to it. I am unaware, there are other game systems with hex side terrain, but normally it's a mix, like there's hex terrain and hex side terrain, whereas Der Weltkrieg has only hex side terrain. It gives the movement a really interesting and I think neat puzzle-like flavor. I really like it. Makes actually kind of feels like OCS to me for that reason. But it definitely does take some getting used to. It is a very unusual map. And I guess there's a bunch of stuff that got messed up in OBS. I don't know how. Did I update OBS? That might be why. Maybe that screwed it up. That's possible. I actually, last minute scrambling before the stream, I had to go and put new stream... I had to stop it before it went live and put new stream keys into OBS. So I think I must have updated, or it updated itself, and that screwed things up. So we have about half an hour left. I'm glad to see some folks know about these Italian front games, because it is an interesting topic. And like I said, there was movement. I mean, there's significant territory changed hands over the course of the campaigns. But it was a lot of brutal fighting over crappy ground and a lot of casualties. I think we are about done clipping with these last couple, and I'm just going to throw these in the tray and we'll continue to chit-chat. Yeah, how he does his terrain analysis is a great question, and I have to assume that that is an absolute nightmare. Okay, so anyway, trying to relax in this current mode that I'm in has been a bit difficult. Trying to play video games, can't really get anything done very easily. Because to me, video games are the video games I like to play anyway are generally the let's just totally unplug and do something that will require zero mental or emotional effort. So I've been playing the Elder Scrolls Online, which can be played that way. You can play it as a super intense and or competitive person if you want, but you don't have to, which is good, because I'm not going to. There are colored stripes on these, and I haven't quite figured out what that means yet. I think it's core affiliation, but I don't know that. But there are also units without stripes. And I think we're just throwing them in the bin for now. So It's a comic about the Italian front of World War I called White Death from Image Comics. That's interesting. Not the kind of thing I would typically associate with Image Comics, that's for sure. So for some reason, the YouTube metrics kept telling me there was like 120 people in the stream, and I don't believe it, because then those people would disappear and it would go back to wherever we were. So I'm showing 67 at the moment from a high of 88. So apparently I'm not being controversial enough. I don't know. I think I've been pretty combative tonight, to be honest. I even argued with people about the inclusion of a specific designer whose work I don't consider to be elegant enough. Now, we could, of course, extend the discussion to RPG designers, but I would rather do that as its own topic. So, So we had the happy hour opening show on Friday for the Armchair Dragoons convention. So that went off very well. Go check out the website. I've had it linked in the show notes for the last couple of weeks. But Armchair Dragoons, just search for Armchair Dragoons. They'll come up. That went very well. They're going to do another one, but they don't have dates for the next one yet because their next thing that is being planned is Origins, which, as of this moment, is supposed to occur in September, not December. That would be weird. John Keyport's asked a great question. New designers that I want to see more of. Sure, but there's also plenty of old designers I want to see more of. I want to see more Mike Resch games, for example. To just name one, because we've mentioned him tonight. I will always look in an interested way at a Mark Herman game. It may end up being a kind of game I don't like, or not interested in for whatever reason. And Rebel Fury may end up being like that. I don't know yet. Okay, we are having problems. So the C3I Gettysburg game that Mark released, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago now. I have that, and I have fooled with it, and I don't like it. I don't like the scale it is at for the gameplay it features. That is a stylistic preference on my part more than it is a commentary on how well the thing works, because it works. Then in the next or following issue, Mark did the Waterloo game. Now they're quite different. That's the thing. Use the same system, and the hex scale might even be similar. I don't know, but the Gettysburg game takes place on this very small, like 11 by 17 map, whereas the Waterloo game takes place on like a full-size wargame map. They feature approximately the same number of pieces. I think Waterloo has a little more. But for me, the Waterloo game feels like an operational game, which I think that system works really well for. Gettysburg, it kind of feels like it's trying to be a grand tactical game, and I think it doesn't work. To me, it's not interesting as on that scale. So I'm interested in seeing what the Rebel Fury stuff looks like. If it's closer to Waterloo, then I might well be interested in it. If it's closer to Gettysburg, then I don't think I will be. Mark has said he wants to do all the Civil War battles, or at least a lot of the Civil War battles in that system. That's a fair point. Justigard mentions it isn't. It was designed by Mark as a introductory war game, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that doesn't help it for me, right? That's because I am not particularly in need of an introductory war game. And if I need there are games that I own because I picked them as games to bring people into war games with. I really like Commands and Colors for that, for example. Whereas I think the Gettysburg game is very abstract and very chess-like, and therefore, because Mark is a chess player, I feel like that's why. And I don't like chess. I aggressively dislike chess because of the abstraction level, in part. So when I say I'm not, automatically gonna just jump all over a Mark Herman game, that specific game is why. Now, on the other hand, his Pacific War, new edition of Pacific War, is one of my most anticipated games of the year, and I sure hope it comes out this year. That would be great. I'll be irritated if it doesn't, but I will understand considering the mess we've been in. And I say that as somebody who has the original game. So I don't need it, but I'd sure like to play the game with nice pieces and nice counter. So Jeff, the problem with that type of idea, that's a good idea, and there's other folks that I think are covering that, It doesn't work for me as a video format, and here's why. Because so much of what I play is not something that I can do a little capsule review of in 10 or 20 minutes. Because we're going to play it for 6 months, right? So by the time I could get a review out about it, it would be old and stale. And that is only because I play way more big monster games, just because that's the people I'm playing with, than I play something like Versailles 1919, which I did play, but I had to solo it. Because I don't have now if we had the board game club, I could have got a game of that going, but we didn't have that last year. So right now that's bad, and we're talking about getting that club going again and our Wednesday group to going again, and that'll be great when those things happen. But if that happens, then I'm going to have to surrender the Tuesday or Thursday event, because I cannot game 3 weeknights. I just can't do it. So we'll see what happens. That'll also interfere with the Wednesday stream with Dan, which I have managed to pull off so far, but we are not starting that anytime soon, from what I can tell. So now I have done like little after action report videos for certain things, like Third Winter. I did one for that. So, and I will have. And I will tell you that while I am unboxing Third Winter, expect that to be a fairly lengthy unboxing video, because I've played it a fair amount and can talk a lot about it and can give a sense of what it is and what makes it tick during the unboxing. So it's not like I'm coming to it and like, ooh, what's this? I didn't know this would be in here. So I haven't seen the finished components, I'll say that, but I've played the game for probably 100 hours. So yeah, me too. I'm doing that now, but one of those games is the Traveler game on Sundays, and that is a virtual game, so which is going well so far. So, I am the ship's doctor, the ship's very irritable doctor. So, I'm going to agree with Doug on that comment, that I am also skeptical of using the same system for those different topics. Not to say that it couldn't work. There are, for example, people that speak pretty highly of the SCS World War I games, none of which I have played. But SCS is abstract enough that maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, it's an 8-page rule book. What do I own? 2 SCS games? I think that's right. I've got It Never Snows. No, I own 3, actually. It Never Snows, Bastogne, and The Mighty Endeavor are the 3 that I have. I have repeatedly looked at Day of Days because I'm interested in the topic, and I have repeatedly said no because we played a little bit of it and I didn't like it. I think it is scale overkill. Is it a Dean Essig design? I'm not sure that it is. What didn't work, it's a company level Normandy game, okay, which covers the whole thing up to like the first 10 days or something like that. So map wise, I think it's 4 or 5 maps. It's quite large, but the density is really high. I felt like you're doing all this detail and all this work, and the amount of detail that you're getting out of it at the end is not that fun or interesting. I think it's a bad match between the granularity of the mechanics and the granularity of the unit and hex scale. I think if it had been a 2-map game, or maybe 2-map game, I think, and make it a battalion or even a regimental scale game, I think you'd have had a much more interesting game. And it would have been a lot easier to deal with and would have been much less tedious to play. I thought it was super tedious to play. So I managed not to drink quite as much scotch as I did on Friday. It's also less potent scotch. This stuff, 47.4%. So it requires a lot of water. So, it's a huge schedule burden. SCS Africa I've never played. The SCS North Africa game that's coming looks interesting, but I think it's 4 maps, but the density is going to be way lower than it is in. I mean, it's not company scale where you have like 8 counter. I don't know, just 8 counter sheets, but it's like 5 counter sheets of companies. It's not going to be anything like that level of density. So that actually looks like it's going to be interesting. Then on the other hand, I have DAC, which thanks John, and I suspect that is all the North Africa game I need. Do I have another North Africa game? Yes, I have War in the Desert. So if DAC is not enough North Africa, I have the Europa War in the Desert, which unit scale wise ought to be almost identical, and map scale wise, I assume it's 16 miles to the hex, which means that North Africa will take up less maps than it does in OCS, but the Near East part of it is like a huge chunk of the Middle East. The old Africa game is like a 1-map game. The new one is like a 4-map game. The new one is basically DAC but SCS. So I think that is, if you're interested in North Africa as a theater, I think it should give you a lot of interesting stuff. I expect it to have a high play value, and it's not that expensive as I recall. I might be misremembering that because I did not pre-order it. Desert Fox Deluxe. I'm so sorry. Lots of people are super pissed about Desert Fox Deluxe. So, to what extent they're justified, listen to them and not me, because I don't have it. I actually came very close to buying it on more than one occasion, and since then I've heard disastrously bad stuff. Yeah, so this is 4 maps and 2. This is the new SCS North Africa. It's $60. This is the pre-order price, but the regular price is $88. It's a SCS rules, this game-specific rules, which is probably another 8-page book, 4 maps, 2 counter sheets, and then probably some player aids or something like that. But looks like there's 10 scenarios or so, 10 or 11 scenarios. So I expect that to have a high value, especially at that price. I think that sounds like a really good price from MMP for that. Lots of people do speak fondly of the African campaign too. That's the old Jedco game, sort of a companion game or spiritual brother to the Russian campaign. But it's the one that Avalon Hill didn't do, so was a lot lesser known than Russian campaign. But it was redone by Compass a couple years ago. So when Desert Fox Deluxe came out in S&T number 300, it was a double-sized game. It's probably more than double-sized, actually. It's 2 or 3 counter sheets and a whole bunch of maps, but they're smaller. A lot of them are smaller maps, and they fit in sort of a weird configuration. It was very highly thought of at the time, at least in my hearing, and it sold out very quickly. And so people were excited when it was going to come out in a box version, but apparently there's like errors in the boxed version that weren't in the magazine version, which makes no sense at all. So I don't know why it's got those problems. I just don't know why. But it's kind of classic Decision Games for that kind of thing to happen too. So like I said, I have been on the fence on Desert Fox Deluxe a couple of times now, and I have always held off. Not necessarily for good reasons either. In some cases it was like, well, I need to order another game from NWS to make this worth my while, and I just couldn't find another game that they had available at that exact moment. That is a thing that happened. So yeah, by current accounts, it's got tons of problems. To what extent those problems were present in the original? Well, not the original, because the original's 40 years old, but in Desert Fox Deluxe from S&T 300, I don't know. If those problems, and at least a couple of them were not, because some of the the TEC being wrong was a new problem introduced in the box version. If those deficiencies were present in the magazine version, then what that tells me is don't listen to people who opine about S&T magazine games. If you're interested, buy them when they're new, preferably, so you don't have to buy them on the secondary market. But and if they're bad, you can turn them over, especially if they're unpunched. Bisnunya mentions No Retreat, the Italian Front. That's one that I had, and it went away. I don't know if I sold it or put it in a pay it forward somewhere or not. I actually had that on a table at one point and really couldn't make heads or tails of it. That is pretty much my problem with the No Retreat series, which is well regarded. I just can't really grok it for whatever reason. There are some quite good videos on No Retreat, the Russian Front on YouTube. So Stigler, are you talking about your experiences with the magazine S&T 300 version or with the later boxed version? Because I have not heard that any deficiencies with the magazine version were fixed in the box version, and that at least one problem was introduced newly into the boxed version. So we are a little bit. I am happy to call it when they screw things up, but I'm also happy to say that this or that Decision Games product is something I really like. So and there are a number of examples of that. So, Grubby Gamer is pretty much right. This has kind of been a running theme. I didn't feel like the box version was all that expensive. I want to say it was about $100 MSRP, but of course, I would get it from NWS and pay a lot less for it, so that's just me. We have somehow managed to lose the stream tracking, so let's get back to that. I will tell you this. So I tried to set up the Operation Goodwood scenario. This isn't that, but it's a Decision Games product from Atlantic Wall, and that setup is an absolute nightmare. There's references to units that don't exist in the counter mix. The formatting is terrible and is riddled with typos. It's a mess. Now they fixed all that, assuming you have both the updated rules that you can download off the website and the errata counters, which you have to register the game for. They did fix that, but it was super confusing while I was doing it. The Counterattack series, Counterattack the YouTube channel, did a playthrough of that scenario, and I don't know how he even set it up, unless he just threw up his hands at the end and said, "Screw it, this guy goes here." Desert Fox Deluxe is on sale for $10 off. Gee, that's attractive. Decision does have a sale of the month, or a deal of the month, every month. I don't normally I don't pay attention to it, but for a different reason than say we might assume. I don't pay attention to it because kind of everything from Decision that I want, I kind of have, except the new version of RAF, which I kind of do want. John Keyports asked, has any game I tried changed my interest in a period or subject one way or the other? Yes, absolutely. That has absolutely occurred with the American Civil War. I have told this story a few times. I had owned a few American Civil War games over the years, including some of the old Great Campaigns games from Avalon Hill, and I'd never played any. I don't think I had ever played a Civil War game up until about 2010, maybe, something like that. When I played, it's probably a couple years after that, probably more like 2014. That's a guess, but and I played For the People, and my play partner at the time was like, "Oh, I just got For the People. You want to try it?" I'm like, yeah, sure, okay. Wasn't super excited about it. Played it, loved it. Now I'm a huge Civil War geek, and I still own more World War II games, but I think U.S. Civil War is my number 2 category now. I think, and I have a bunch of books, and U.S. Civil War is my number 1 like books collection. Okay, so all right, setting aside Desert Fox Deluxe fiasco for the moment. John Longshore mentioned he was going to buy Storm of Steel from DG. I actually was looking at that today. So I had a copy. I think I paid about $40 for my copy. Okay, it's roughly a $150 game or something like that. There's an expansion for it, and if you buy it now from Decision, you get it's like the second edition, which is basically the old box with the expansion in it. The expansion adds a bunch of stuff, cleans up the rules, does a bunch of stuff. So if you're going to try to play Storm of Steel, you are much better off with the second edition. Like, you can download the rules changes, but you don't get the extra count. You can download the counters too, but you'd have to make counters, which sucks. That's a Joe Miranda design. That actually looks like a pretty good game to me. I don't know how fun it is necessarily, but that game actually does look interesting. I was a little bit tempted to buy it again, to be honest. Again, I'd get the second edition, though. That's the thing. And the one on Enterprise Games didn't say whether it was first or second, so I assume it's first. You don't want that. The expansion is basically unfindable on its own. You really kind of have to get it with the main game. Yes, I did see that Decision picked up the rights to the Napoleonic 20 series. We talked about that on the show with Jim last week, I think. I think so. Yeah, we did. Jim is also a huge fan, as you may have picked up. If you didn't watch last week's show with Jim Warsowski, please do. Jim is also a tremendous fan of Decision games, as you will notice watching the Missing Seattle. Is that the second edition Storm of Steel or the first edition? Second edition. Why don't you email? Let me look at it. Oh, I can't spell. Too much scotch. I don't know if it's my keyboard or if I'm just becoming a crappy typist. But I've been doing a lot of... Missing Seattle. Ping me on Twitter with the link to that, please, if you don't mind. Because I might be willing to buy that off of you, if so. There's 19 copies for sale on BGG, which is not a great sign. Its rating is 6.3, but I think that rating is... Oh, you're in Canada? Ugh, that might be... It's a good, fair price, but I don't know if shipping makes that suck or not. It probably does. I shipped Dan Pancaldi some stuff, and it costs $60 or $70 to ship up to him in Quebec. So it just shipping internationally just sucks. It's, I don't know that we can do anything about that. So thanks though. I still got some stuff in the storage unit too. I want to get everything organized, but finding the time to do all that is always a challenge. It's normally would be a challenge, and now it's more of a challenge. So, which reminds me that I'm out of water. But that is okay. Okay, so I don't have anything else scheduled for the channel for the week. Like I said, I want to try and get an unboxing video done tomorrow. so we can have one for Thursday. I don't know what it's going to be. It's to be something from the pile. I will be filming a couple more unboxing videos when new stuff shows up. So again, we have 2 from GMT and 2 from Hollandspiel. And then I got an RPG video I want to make, and the 2 Minutes to Midnight video, and the sale video. Now, after due consideration, I think I'm still not done with the sale video. I started filming it, and it's I just haven't had time to put it together. It's a big time commitment just to do the video, let alone to do all the shipping. So, but on the other hand, I really want to get it done this month so that I have time to do the shipping rather than having to do it, having to go into the office next week or next month. So I'm really going to be trying to get that done this week and then hopefully launch next week. Now, patrons are going to get to see it first, a day earlier than everybody else. So bear that in mind. But we'll see. We'll see what that turns into. So I have quite a bit of stuff right now. I have 3 boxes of games from one friend and 2 boxes of games from another friend, but one of those boxes is all S&Ts, so I think it's going to be 2 waves anyway. So I think I'll try it that way this time and then only do half the stuff. That's the plan. Still going to be some good stuff in there and a few things of mine. So not including Killing Ground. But all right, so yeah, we're not out of scotch definitely, but I think I'm out of gas. So we will call it for tonight. Don't forget to tune in to No Enemies Here's channel on Wednesday, where we'll be talking about some wargame related topic. I don't usually, because Dan does not provide me with the link in advance, so I normally don't have that propagated out on social media. So just tune in then, and Dan and I will be talking about something. And then next week we'll be back here. So I appreciate that. I do not want you to take it in the shorts on the shipping. So thanks, but if you can give me an actual quote that's not ridiculous, then that's different. But I'm not just gonna have you eat the shipping. Screw that. All right. So again, thanks everybody. We'll try and get some more content out for you reasonably soon, and we will definitely be back on Monday night with another counterclipping show. By the way, I do want to kind of stick to trying about once a month to having a guest on. So the next 2 at least should just be me and counterclipping and scotch. So again, I want to thank everybody for stopping by. We had a high of 88, I think, unless that 120 spike was a real thing, but I don't think it was. So again, thanks everybody, and we'll see you all next time.